We finished up last video by just creating our UI on our Surge View controller. The point of this video is going to be to pass the username we enter in the text field to the next screen, the follower list VC, so that eventually we can take that username and query to get all the followers for that username. So the whole point of this video is passing data. However, there's a few steps along the way that we got to do to get there, right? It's not just a clean path. For example, when you click into your username here, the keyboard slides up, great. So you type in whatever username you want. Oh crap, there's no way to get rid of the keyboard. When I hit return, like nothing happens. I can't hit the button. Even if I did hit the button, there's no button action to like do anything. So we got some work to do here. So the outline for the video is this. We're going to handle the keyboard stuff, dismiss the keyboard, hook up the return button. We got to give the get followers button an action so it actually, does something. And then we have to pass the data, pass the username to the next screen. And we actually have to create the follower list screen as well. And we'll wrap up the video that way. So let's get started. First up, we're going to tap anywhere on that text field to dismiss, and we're going to use a tap gesture to do that. Actually, if I pull back up the UI, there's a couple different ways to do this. I've done it before where there's like an input accessory view above the keyboard that maybe has like a dismiss button on it, and I create an extension so like all my text fields have that. That's one way to do it. We're going to keep it simple here and just tap anywhere on the screen to dismiss the keyboard. So to do that, we'll stop that. We're going to add a tap gesture recognizer again. So when you tap anywhere, we'll dismiss. So let's create that function here. Func create dismiss keyboard tap gesture. And so we're going to start off with let tap equals UI tap gesture. Now, there's a bunch of different gestures you could implement, right? Swipe gestures, pan gestures, etc. You see this one's going to be a tap gesture, but you can see UI swipe, swipe gesture recognizer. There's that. So you can look into gesture recognizers more if you like, but we're just going to use the basic tap gesture recognizer. To initialize that, you need to take in a target, which is going to be the self.view. And the selector is going to be hashtag selector. So selector is like the action. You're going to see us use this again when we add the target to our button, the get followers button, which tells us to actually like do something. So you'll see that. And the Objective-C method we're going to use is UI view.end editing. And we're not passing in any parameters. That's what this like parentheses underscore colon is. We're not passing in anything. So we can clean that up a little bit. And if you're wondering what end editing does, like where did I come up with that? Google. But anyway, open in developer documentation and you can see. So it causes the view or one of its embedded text fields to resign the first responder status. So I don't want to go down the whole rabbit hole of the responder chain. At a high level, what that means is like what view is going to intercept the tap target on when the user actually touches the glass of the screen, what view is actually going to act on that action. And right now the text field is the first responder. So when you resign first responder status, the keyboard will dismiss and we're back to the normal view. So that's what that does. And after we create the gesture, we have to like put it onto a specific view. And the view we're going to put it on is just the overall view, right? We want them to tap anywhere. In theory, we could add this tap gesture to the logo UI image view, and they would have to tap the logo. Just to let you know what you can do. That's bad UX. But anyway, so we're going to do view.add gesture recognizer. And the gesture recognizer we're going to add is the one we just created on line 34. So tap right up there. Now, if we call this function here in view.load, create dismiss keyboard tap gesture. So now if we run it again, once we pull up the keyboard, we should be able to tap anywhere on the screen and the keyboard dismisses. So enter username, SSSSS. We're going to tap up here in the upper right somewhere, keyboard dismisses. Pull up the keyboard, tap down here in the lower left, keyboard dismisses. So again, this is just one way to dismiss the keyboard. Like I said, I've used the input accessory view before. We're going to keep it simple here. So that is complete. However, now we just have this return key, and the return key doesn't do anything. If you didn't know, you can actually customize this return key to say something, to do something, like a done button, a go button, a send button, whatever is applicable to what you're doing with that button. We're going to turn on to a go button. So let's do that. So if you weren't aware, all this keyboard customization and stylizing is attached to the text field. So in theory, like if you had 3 text fields, each text field would have a different keyboard type, right? You could, like if you were entering a name and a phone number, you can change the keyboard type for the phone number text field to just be a number pad. So we have to go back into our GF text field, our custom text field. And in all this customization, we need to add one more thing, and that would be, you can do keyboard type right here. And that is going to equal, I'll do dot, I'll show you all the options. I mean, ASCII, numpad, default, email address. This is a big one because a lot of apps require email, and the email address keyboard is just more convenient for entering an email. But you can see there's a bunch of different keyboard types. And I forgot, we're actually just changing the return type, not the keyboard type, but still, I'm gonna leave this in here, even though this was a mistake, because it's good learning for you to see all the different keyboard types and a good practice to make sure you have the right keyboard type to what you're entering in the text field. Again, ours is still default, so we don't need this. And I did mistype that. We're looking for a return key type. That's what we're looking for. And my spacing's all messed up now. Placeholder, get back down there. So return key type, not keyboard type. But again, I left it in, good learning, is dot. Now you can see, this is what the keyboard return key is gonna say. You know, continue, done, emergency call, go, Google, join, next, right? There's a whole bunch of them, route search. We're gonna go with go, because that's what we want. We wanted to say go. So that is just customizing what the keyboard return key says. We haven't hooked it up yet. That's the next step. Now, in order to take an action when this go button is pressed, the search VC will need to conform to the UI text field delegate. And we're going to talk more about delegates and protocols throughout this course. At a very, very high level, think about a delegate. Like a delegate just sits back and listens, basically. And it's basically, once it's listening to something, like this delegate is going to listen to this view controller. It's going to say like, when this action happens, I will act on this. And in our case, our action is going to be tapping the return key, and then it'll wait for that to happen, and then the view controller will take an action. That's super high level. We're going to get into it more throughout the course. But so this is also a personal preference here is when I conform to a delegate, whether it be the UI table view delegate or scroll view delegate, in this case, the text field delegate, I like to put those in extensions. This is just to compartmentalize the code and organize it. Doesn't change the performance at all. It's a personal preference, a code organization thing. A lot of people love it. Some people are against it. Take it or leave it. So I do extension, and then this is going to be on the search VC. And again, UI text field delegate. Text field delegate, there we go. And then once I conform to this, well, I should get an error here in a second. Maybe not. Oh, I haven't set the delegate yet. I thought I was going to get an error. So actually, let's do that since I mentioned it before we actually write in the function. Basically, remember I said this, when you conform to a delegate, you're sitting there listening. Well, you have to tell the view controller like what to listen to. So in our case, we want it to listen to the username text field, like right when the return key gets entered. So in our configure text field, we have to set the delegate. This is a very common mistake. A lot of times people try to conform to a delegate without like setting the delegate. And essentially setting the delegate is saying like, hey, listen to me. But if it doesn't know who to listen to, it doesn't act on it. So in order for us to actually act on this UI text field delegate, we have to do username text field dot delegate equals self. And again, self being the search VC, that's self. So now we're listening to this text field, if you will. So the text field delegate has a bunch of functions, but if you just start typing should, you're going to get a should, or I'm sorry, text field. Here's where you get all the delegates, like did end editing, did begin editing. So you can see like how you can take action when stuff is going on. Should clear, should end editing, did end editing. We're going to do should return, text field should return. So basically this happens when you press the button. And we're just gonna print something real quick. Print did tap return, just to make sure it's working. So let's run the program again. This is where we're going to, crap, I gotta return true. Return true, sorry. Now we're gonna run it. And this is just to make sure our delegate is all hooked up and working. And then once we pass the data, we're gonna call that pass data function right in here. So tapping on the username text field, you see our nice go button down here. Let's tap on go, and you see we printed did tap return. So our UI text field delegate is all hooked up, working. Again, we're going to replace this print statement with our function that says, basically pass the data to the next screen. We haven't written that yet. That's what we're going to start working on now. Before we can pass data, we have to have like a destination to pass that data to, right? And that is going to be our follower list VC, which as you see here on the screen, that is going to be the collection view of all the followers. In order to get those followers though, we need to know what username to make the network call on. So that's what we're doing here. So again, get up followers, Command N, and you may notice, we'll talk about this after we create this. So there's going to be UI view controller again, and this is going to be follower list VC. Next. Yep, create it. So now you may notice this is getting a bit unruly here on the left. We're going to refactor that in a little bit and talk about architecture and all that stuff. Again, one thing at a time. So follower list VC is here. So when you're passing data, essentially you have to have a variable on this screen to set. this will make sense in a little bit if you've never passed data. So what we're doing on the follower list VC is we want to pass a username. So that means the follower list VC like has to have a username variable. Var username, and it's going to be of type string. And there we go. So this username will be set when we pass the data to it. So now that we have that, let's go back and actually pass the data. So back in our search VC, you can see here, well, first of all, there's two ways to get there, right? They can hit the go button on the keyboard, which we just did, and they can also tap the get followers button. So we have the go path done on the keyboard. Let's actually add a target to the call to action button, which will pass the data. When you add a target, just like we talked up here about the gesture recognizer, where you have an action, a hashtag selector, we have to pass in a function. So our function is going to be the function that actually passes the data. So let's create that function first. So when we create our button target, we have a function to give it to, and you'll see how that all ties together. So let's create our function up here. And real quick, if you notice that I'm putting these functions up here, it's because I typically like to keep all my UI configuration stuff towards the bottom. Only because most likely when you come back and you're adjusting a screen, most likely you're kind of messing with the logic. You may not be messing with the existing UI. So I like to kind of push that towards the bottom. Again, personal preference thing, just letting you into my mind. So the next thing is going to be function push, because remember we're talking about the navigation controller. We're pushing a new view controller onto the stack. Back to a couple of videos ago with that a deck of cards reference, we're pushing a new view controller onto the stack. So the terminology with navigation controllers is push and pop. So when you go back, you're popping that view controller off the stack to show the view controller underneath it. So push follower list VC. And we're going to fill in this function with code in a bit, but I wanted to get that there so when I create my button target, I can actually give it a function. And anytime you're using hashtag selector up here, the function you create is going to have to be an @objc function. And that's because when you use hashtag selector, this is still kind of remnant from Objective-C, so you have to expose this function to Objective-C there. So now we want to add our target to the button. So now in the configure call to action button, we're going to add the target. So call to action button dot add target, as you see, again, target is going to be self. Action, like we said, hashtag selector, and then see how it says it takes in an @objc method. That's why we just did that. And it's going to take in push follower list VC, and it's going to be touch up. So it's kind of weird. Touch up inside is the normal button tap, but there's all kinds of different button taps you can do, drag enter, drag inside. To be honest with you, I've never used anything else besides touch up inside, so it's kind of an edge case to use the other stuff, but at least you know they exist, the kind of different taps you can do on a button. So we added basically what this line of code says, adding the target, is whenever we tap the get followers button, the call to action button, push follower list VC is what's going to be called. And right now there's no code in there, but that's what's going to be called when we tap the button. And then push followers VC, let's actually go ahead and do it now, is what we're going to call here in text field should return. So this push followers VC function is going to be called when the user taps go on the keyboard or when they tap get followers button. So now let's pass some data in this function. So first of all, we need to create the follower list VC. Let follower list VC equal capital FOL follower list VC, right? The class type, we're creating a new one. And now we just need to, now that we have the object of the follower list VC, remember our follower list VC now has a username variable. So we can do follower list VC, the lowercase one, right? The local one, dot username, because it has that, equals username text field dot text. Now, if you're astute, you may be saying, oh, we're opened up to some errors. What if it's an empty text? What if it's all kind of crazy characters? We're going to get into that text validation in a little bit. For right now, we're just testing. They call it the golden path or the happy path, right? The no edge cases, not accounting for weird things. We just want to make sure the happy path works, and then we go in and handle the edge cases. So we also want to set the title of this VC. So follower list VC dot title equals username text field dot text, and we got to line these up. And then now the navigation controller that we're already in, we want to push the follower list VC on top of the stack now that we've configured it. So push navigation, navigation controller dot push view controller, and this is going to be the follower list VC that we just created, and animated is going to be true. We want to see it slide in. So this is, again, we got to do some text validation and some error checking real quick, but for the happy path, this is what you need to do to pass data. You create the object, configure the data you want to pass. In this case, we're passing the username textfield.text, setting the username and the title, and then you push that VC onto the stack. So one last thing before we test. If you remember, we set our navigation controller is navbar hidden to true, right? Because remember I showed the last video when I went back, it appeared on this search screen. We don't want that. So this is kind of like view controller specific when you hide it and unhide it. If we didn't adjust this on this next screen, the navigation controller would be hidden because that was set on this previous screen. We need to go to the follower list VC. So in view to load, now we want to show the is navbar hidden is true. And we also need to set the background color. View.background color equals .system background. Okay, so now again, we're showing the view controller and we set the background color now. So now if we test it, we should go in there. So now if I type my username in, actually it doesn't matter what username I type in because we're not doing any validation. We're not making any network calls. It's gonna work. If we hit go, now we push that and you see the navigation controller up top, we got our back to search, sallen0400 because we set the title there. So we're passing our data successfully. If we tap back, we don't see the navigation controller here. We're all good. However, if I hit go again, this is the old way, right? We want to show those large navigation titles, right? So let's do that real quick. That's one line of code. So back to the code here, you do navigation controller.nav navigation bar .prefers large titles, and that is going to be equal to true. So let's run it again real quick, and we should get those nice new in iOS 11. So I guess they're kind of old now. It doesn't matter what I put in here. Hit go. Now we get the nice text here. However, our search is blue, right? We're kind of going for this green tint, this green hue everywhere. So we don't want to see the search blue. We want the search to be green, just like the rest of our app. So let's go back and fix that. And because we want all of our navigation bars to do that, remember we talked about this with the tab bar, like the appearance thing. So in the scene delegate, we're going to do that. We're going to create a new function here called configure navigation bar. Configure navigation bar. Configure navigation bar, UI navigation bar dot appearance. Remember when you do dot appearance, that's like overall. So that means all of our UI navigation bars are going to have this dot tint color equals dot system. There's too many systems. System green. Wow, it takes a lot of autocomplete to get to system green. System green. So now when we run this, all of our navigation bars are going to have this. And remember, the navigation controllers, which hold navigation bars. So if you remember, we have two navigation controllers, one in the search and one in the favorites VC. They're both going to have this because we set it there once. If, I did it before I tested it. I forgot to call configure navigation bar. So up here in the we'll connect to configure navigation bar. Now let's run it and type in a random username, hit go. Now our search is system green, just like our tab bar, again, for that cohesive feel. It's not blue. So we successfully passed the data. Now let's work on kind of cleaning it up, doing that little bit of text validation that we talked about earlier. So let's head back to our search VC. And to do this, we're gonna create a computed property, because what we want to do here is in our past data, right, in this push follower list VC, we want to add a guard statement real quick that basically, just to put this in like normal human speak, is basically said, hey, if our text is valid, right, if there's actually text there, then go ahead and push the follower list VC. So we're going to do a guard statement to do that. So when you use a guard statement, you need kind of a conditional. So we're going to use that computed property to get that conditional, and that is to just real simply see if the user name text field is empty. So to create a computed property, var is username entered, right? You'll see why I named it this way. We'll talk about that in a little bit, because originally I had something like is username empty, but you'll see why I decided to name it like this. It makes it more understandable later on. So to do computed property, you have to give it a type, and then you do open and close curly braces, like you're doing a function, and then you have to return something for a computed property. So return, and what we're going to return is username text field dot text dot is empty. So what this checks for is like, hey, if the username is empty, this is going to return that. So this is going to return true if it's empty. So we don't want is username entered to be true, right? We want the opposite of that. So if we put the exclamation point here, that's going to return the opposite. Now that may seem backwards. Like I said, I did have is username empty. You could go either way on this. This is a small thing. But you'll see why, because I think it reads better at the call site when it just says is username entered in the guard statement. I'd rather have the slightly confusing thing up here than in all the logic of the code. What I like to do real quick too is when there's only like one line for return, just for cleanliness, I like to put these on one line. Again, only when it's relatively simple and straightforward. Okay, so now that we have our conditional to guard against, let's go down into the where we're passing the data, and let's enter this guard statement. So I look at guard statements like a line in the sand. I know that may be an American or US kind of term, but basically what that means is like nothing below this line is going to happen. That's kind of the point of a guard statement, and you'll see how that comes into play here. So I like to do guard is username entered, else return. And for right now, we're just returning. In the next video, we're going to create a custom alert. So you will see, we'll handle errors in here. And actually, let's go ahead and make this 2 lines, because we're going to add a print statement here. And we'll talk about this here in a little bit, because I want to make sure that, hey, this worked. Print no username. So again, back to the naming and why I named it this way. I think, because yes, I get it was kind of confusing doing the bang here to make it false or make it like the opposite. I just think it reads better in the code when you say, hey, guard is username. Whoops, I wrote this backwards. Else that, sorry. Guard is username entered. Okay, if else, then handle the error. If it is entered, cool, move along. And that just reads better to me. Whereas if I name this like is username empty, then I would have to put the bang down here. And now you have to do that mental gymnastics of like, wait, which one is it? I just don't like that. I like to name it nicely at the call site. Again, just a little tidbit there. So let's make sure this is working. So if we run this, we should print no username, and we shouldn't move on to the next screen when we don't enter anything. So let's tap get followers, which is also a test of our button that we haven't tested yet. And okay, so we didn't move on to the next screen, and you can see in my my printout here, no username. So the guard statement in the computer property is working for some very, very basic text validation. Now, onto the topic of regular expressions, because this is when you get into some like serious text validations. I'm going to include a Swift file, a common string extension that I use for validating emails, right? Making sure the email format is right, making sure it has an @ symbol, making sure there's a dot something at the end, like a .com, .co, something, right? There's email validation. There's also password validation, right? So, hey, my password has to have 1 uppercase letter, 1 number, no special characters. There's all kinds of weird password requirements. And as you see these on the screen right here, this is what regular expressions are. You see the string that looks like a bunch of gibberish, all kind of characters. I think for the purpose of this video, for somebody who is a junior developer trying to get their first job, you do not have to understand how regular expressions work, right? Like it still boggles my mind. I mean, like look at it, like it's ridiculous. However, know that they exist and know how to use them, which you'll see in this string, the string extension, because you're going to have to Google every single text validation. And it's just, the regular expressions are very, very tricky and difficult. Know that they exist, and they exist for every language. So if you Google something like even a specific password format, you're probably going to find the answer. So again, know it exists, know about it, take a look at the Swift file for the string extension, practice it, use it. The other kind of validation we could have done here, right? We're checking for a blank username. That's really the only check we're doing. As you see here with this regular expressions, we could have checked to make sure it's a valid format of a GitHub username. However, I didn't go down this path because this gets into some really tricky regular expressions, because here's the constraints for a GitHub username. It has to be alphanumeric. It can have dashes in it, but the dashes can't be consecutive dashes, and it can't begin or end with a dash, and minimum 39 characters. So that's a tricky regular expression. I felt it was beyond the scope of this, but again, I want you to know it exists. And I think the main point here in this take-home project, and when you, again, get to the second part of the interview where you talk about your take-home project, it does show value, even if it's not in your code, if you say, yes, I know that's there. I know how to do that. Yes, I know where to find that. That wraps up this video. What we're going to do next video is actually create a reusable custom alert, and we're going to show that alert here when they don't have a username. And I do want to say that like this custom alert is above and beyond. I guarantee you no take-home project is going to expect you to create custom alerts. However, I do feel like it's an interesting topic. I get asked about it a lot, so I want to show you this. And I do think if you do create your own custom alert on the take-home project, it'll be impressive. So let's get to that in the next video.